Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Morgan Harper, and I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the American Economic Liberties Project. 4 years ago, we released a document called The Courage to Learn, identifying mergers approved or settled during the Obama administration that accelerated our country's monopoly problem. That piece was meant to encourage future enforcers to take more of a structuralist approach to prevent further concentration in the economy. Live Nation-Ticketmaster was one of the mergers we thought the Department of Justice should have handled differently. Fast forward to August 2022, and we started to notice random fans on Twitter, now X, organically complaining about the poor service they had received from Ticketmaster. Messages as simple as, "I hate Ticketmaster," appeared in our feeds, and we moved quickly to organize this discontent into the Break Up Ticketmaster Coalition, which got a little attention at first, but then it got a whole lot more once Swifties joined the fight. In the end, over 100,000 live event fans have submitted letters to the Department of Justice calling on them to do something about Live Nation Ticketmaster's monopoly. What that something will be remains to be seen, but in the meantime, today, we will hear from some of our coalition members describing the live events industry under this monopoly power, as well as academics and legal experts contemplating what remedies the Department of Justice could pursue. But first, we are so honored to have Senator Amy Klobuchar join us to provide remarks live at this critical juncture in the fight. Over the past several years, Senator Klobuchar has tirelessly elevated the voices of independent promoters, artists, and fans to ensure the Department of Justice and others in Congress understand the harm stemming from Live Nation Ticketmaster's monopoly. Senator Klobuchar is the first woman elected to represent the state of Minnesota in the United States Senate. She is the chairwoman on the Judiciary Subcommittee on Competition Policy, Antitrust, and Consumer Rights, and the chairwoman of the Senate Rules Committee. Her book, Antitrust, a personal favorite of ours here at Economic Liberties, was also on the New York Times bestsellers list. Senator Klobuchar, thank you for your leadership on this and so many other issues and for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I was muted. Oh no, here we go. Or can you hear me now? Is everything good? All right. So thank you very much, Morgan, for that nice introduction and for all you do, and to the American Economic Liberties Project for hosting this discussion. I will say Swifties Revenge, the Case for Breaking Up Live Nation Ticketmaster is the most creative title for any event that I have participated in the last year. It was a kind of shot in the arm when our somewhat usual mundane antitrust hearings involved protesters outside cheering us on for doing something about Ticketmaster. And the way I look at it, anything that gets people focused on monopolies in a real world way is going to help us advance the work that's going on at the Justice Department and the FTC, as well as the work that's going on in Congress. So while Swifties Revenge is certainly an appropriate name, I'd say reigning monopolies is, in the words of Taylor Swift herself, better than revenge. But I think it isn't just about Taylor Swift. We've seen fans of artists from Bad Bunny to Harry Styles to BTS and Bruce Springsteen face exorbitant fees and poor service as a result of the merger that you just talked about, Morgan. Music and live events are about bringing people together. In fact, one of my favorite bills I worked on and got passed during the pandemic was Save Our Stages, a bill I led with John Cornyn of Texas. And that was the moment where I realized, and maybe a lot of the energy we're seeing on Ticketmaster is harnessed here, how much people missed during the pandemic live music. They missed the artists playing on their front steps. They missed being able to go to see a new band. They missed being able to see a play. All of these things people realized brought them together. And it was one of the reasons we got this incredible political support for the biggest investment in the arts in the history of America that we passed to keep the venues alive and keep the music alive. Okay, another musical reference. I do come from the state of Bob Dylan and Prince. So Unfortunately, a lack of competition and unfair business practices are making that experience with people are coming back to in droves post-pandemic, but it's making this too expensive for them to do, or they do it and they spend way too much money doing them. So I want to make the case first before I kind of diagnose the problem here, is that of the progress that is afoot. That hearing we held, that was a huge deal. In the words of the president, a huge effing deal. It got a lot of attention, and that was good. And that led us, as I said that day, and it was very bipartisan. It allowed us to set the stage for getting the information to the Justice Department, getting some attention from the public. So they started asking questions that did elicit some changes here and there. But that is the first thing. Secondly, we have those experts at the Justice Department, reportedly, from what we've heard on the grapevine of people getting calls, investigating the company's anti-competitive conduct and, the consent decree and violations, things like that. Third, and finally, I've introduced a number of bills to, as have some of my colleagues, to stop ticketing companies from keeping competitors out of the market and require upfront disclosure of the full price of tickets. So that's the trajectory. So let's now ground it in some facts and a context. Today, Live Nation doesn't just dominate ticketing. It owns many of the major venues. That's a change over the last decades, including almost 2/3 of the top grossing arenas and amphitheaters in the US. Maybe that's a fact you didn't know. And it also controls concert tour promotions and sponsorships. That means Live Nation has leverage to make artists use their venues, boosting its bottom line, and then put pressure on other venues to use Ticketmaster. And Ticketmaster has used its dominance in primary ticketing markets, as you know, like 70% of all markets, 80% of large events, 90% of the most elite events, to dominate secondary ticket sales as well. So they've got the ticketing market where they're a monopoly on its own. Then they've got the arenas, and then they are promoting the talent, and they tie it all together into one big triple monopoly. So it has gotten so bad that some venues simply assume that if they don't use Ticketmaster for their primary ticketing, they won't get Live Nation concerts. And let me repeat that. Live Nation is so powerful that it doesn't even need to exert pressure. It doesn't need to threaten. Everyone just falls in line. So if you were looking for the signs of a monopoly, here they are. Again, Ticketmaster, 70% of ticket sales at major venues, including over 80% of concert venues. 90% of Billboard Top 40 tours, as well as NBA, NHL, and NFL games. As AELP pointed out, Ticketmaster's parent company, Live Nation, owns 172 major venues and has exclusive booking rights for 61 more. And for the venues it doesn't own, Live Nation uses its power as the leading concert promoter to lock venues into long-term exclusive contracts with Ticketmaster. And that is a very important thing to know, as those contracts those terms have gotten longer and longer, shutting out competition. In 2022, research from AELP showed that of the 68 largest venues in the US, 56 use Ticketmaster. The next closest competitor, AXS, served only 9. AELP also found that Ticketmaster raked in more than 83% of all ticketing revenue from US arenas. Now, those are the facts. Now, what's the results? As a result, the Live Nation experience, the live event experience, has become increasingly out of reach for fans, as people can tell you tried to get tickets to the Eras Tour. I know people that had a bunch of money that literally could just fork over thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for each ticket. Then I know people that didn't have much money, but they just went the extra mile and spent everything they had because their kid really wanted to go. Look at the sky-high ticket fees and service issues. Fees, often hidden from view until a consumer is typing in their credit card information, can account for up to 30% of the ticket. In October, NBC News looked up tickets for a concert at Boston's House of Blues. That's Live Nation venue. The price they say was $103. That's what they saw on a ticket. But after adding the ticket to the cart, signing into a Live Nation account, and proceeding with the purchase, they discovered an undisclosed service and processing fees of more than $21 per ticket. Before NBC News did this test, Live Nation had promised consumers that it would disclose fees for shows at venues. But as monopolists often do, they played games with their words. When their self-imposed deadline for implementing all-in pricing passed last year without full compliance, I wrote a public letter to their CEO to point out this failure and demand they live up to their promise. This situation is just another example of why we need to update our antitrust laws to make it easier for our enforcers to crack down on anti-competitive behavior and look at past deals, like what Morgan referred to, the Live Nation Ticketmaster merger. Let me make clear, we want this all to work. We want them to continue to do business. But when they have this big a monopoly and you don't have competition, that is not the American way and has all kinds of repercussions. So let's go back to our 3 avenues for action. First, we need to support the DOJ in its enforcement of the consent decree over Live Nation and the reported investigation into whether Live Nation broke anti-monopoly laws. That's why we did that hearing, Senator Lee and me. Fun note for me, we had some great testimony from Clyde Lawrence of the band Lawrence. We didn't know what he'd be like. He was really good. Everyone was asking him questions, including Ted Cruz. And he kept turning to someone behind him. And people I knew were texting me and saying, does Clyde Lawrence have a lawyer? And I'm like, no, it's his sax player. Okay, that was a true fact. That was his advisor during the hearing. Clyde told us that Live Nation can require artists to agree to essentially whatever the company wants because it has a hand in ticket sales, venues, and promotion. And he said that on a $30 ticket, the band only gets $12, and half of that goes to touring costs. And in other words, his band, which had 8 members at the time, only at the time got $6.75 a person. And as he pointed out, that's pre-tax and before they paid health insurance. Second, we must pass targeted legislative solutions to foster competition. And by the way, if Clyde has a better deal now because he testified, okay, that's great. But we know that that's not going to solve everything. Or if they made some changes, which we're glad about, that our hearing put focus on, that certainly doesn't where it ends because there's all kinds of other issues. We must pass targeted legislative solutions. Ticketmaster has exclusive, as I noted, ticketing contracts with 80% of the venues, which can lock up a venue for up to 10 years. That makes it nearly impossible for rival ticket companies to compete. AELP points out that in addition to a breakup, the best way to restore competition and innovation among ticket sellers is to preclude Ticketmaster from leveraging its scale to obtain exclusive deal agreements. That's why Senator Blumenthal and I introduced legislation to prevent any one ticketing company from boxing out competitors with these excessively long contract terms. I've also introduced bipartisan legislation to increase transparency in ticket sales and protect consumers from fake or overpriced tickets. And believe me, when you talk to the venues, there are still fake tickets and the people show up and they don't have the ticket's not even good. So our bill does 3 things. 1, upfront disclosure of a ticket's all-in price, including fees. 2, prohibiting resellers from selling tickets they don't have. And 3, empowering the FTC to crack down on bad faith actors who use bots to scoop up tickets before real fans get them. So let's be clear. We passed a bot bill before, but it needed more flesh on the bone, right? And so that's what this basically does. The price you pay should be what you see, and you should get the tickets you pay for. Now, there is still more to do, right? We've got to pass these bills. We've got to do something about those venues. But I want to say, to get to number 1, action by the Justice Department, which is key to a lot of the things you'll probably be talking about today. And 2, which is passing these bills, which are more focused generally on consumer issues, we need the 3rd avenue. That's you. That's action. Americans across party lines, including a lot of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, agree that our country has a monopoly problem. That's because competition is the engine of capitalism. This isn't a red issue or a blue issue. It's an American issue. It's time to stop admiring the problem and actually do something about it. And as we continue this fight, it's becoming more and more obvious that we are not alone. Hundreds of advocates were at the AELP's Anti-Monopoly Summit that I attended last spring. Your work is part of building a broad and powerful modern antitrust movement that includes Democrats and Republicans. The fact that this is so prevalent, this monopoly power in one industry, music, when we know it's also seeping in everywhere and there's major problems with tech and the like, don't get me started. Music, that really gets to people. So I think we've hit a nerve on this because people love their music. They love their going to their local community theater. They want to be able to afford to do it. And we want to make antitrust cool again. And I can't think of a better way than this. So I'm grateful to have AELP as a partner in this fight. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your event.
Thank you, Senator. We know you have a very busy schedule. Appreciate you and your entire team for making it possible to join today and for those remarks. With that, I
back
will.
to our caucus lunch. Thank you.
Okay, enjoy lunch. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Keep tuning in, though. Keep tuning in and eat. Yeah. Okay, with that, I'll turn it to Krista Brown, our Senior Policy Analyst at Economic Liberties, to lead our first panel. Krista?
Great. Thank you so much, Morgan. And thank you to all the listeners for joining us on these next two panels. As Morgan said, my name is Krista Brown, and I'm a Senior Policy Analyst at the American Economic Liberties Institute. And I'll be moderating this first panel, where we'll be joined by Kevin Erickson, the Director of Future of Music Coalition, which is a nonprofit that has worked for 2 decades to ensure that musicians' independent voices are heard on the issues that impact them. And it advocates for a system that allows diverse local music communities to thrive. Kevin's background includes direct experience in many aspects of the industry, including concert booking and promotion, community radio, and independent music retail. He continues to work as a record producer and musician, which you can tell from his background, as well as one other musician that we have joining us. We are very lucky to have David Combs, someone who has been a part of the DC music scene for over 25 years, mostly as an artist, but also as a promoter. David is a guitarist, vocalist, and manager of Bad Moves and Dim Wizard. And 6 years ago, he started or founded Rediscover Fire, which is a concert promotion company where he books shows for a number of venues, including Black Cat, which is a well-known venue in DC. We also have John Brayo, who has more than 20 years of experience championing the rights of consumers and the underserved. At the National Consumers League, he advocates for stronger consumer protections on issues related to telecommunications, privacy, live event ticketing, and other consumer concerns. In addition, John has testified multiple times before Congress and federal agencies. Finally, we have Brian Hess, who has been named one of DC's top lobbyists for 3 years in a row from the Hill and National Institute of Lobbying and Ethics. He serves as the executive director of nonprofit group Sports Fans Coalition. And Brian has successfully led a number of efforts at the state and local level to protect fans from when buying tickets, provide resources to those at risk of gambling addiction, and passing the Equal Pay for Team USA Act, which grants women Olympians equal pay. So with that, we'll jump into the first question on this panel. Can each of you, without getting into too much detail, describe some of the harms Live Nation and Ticketmaster cause to various parties you represent? What are some of the effects of having such a large company dominate the live events industry? Kevin, we'll start with you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy to be part of this. I guess we start with the observation that in competition policy, the music creators and music fans, their interests are closely aligned. We might be on the opposite side of the transaction, but we both benefit from a marketplace environment where a bunch of different partners are competing to best serve artists and audiences' needs. And when you have ownership consolidation at this scale and unchecked corporate misbehavior at this scale, it alters both the scope of competition and the character of competition. It means that power is centralized, but it also creates incentives to abuse that consolidated power. And so in every market that Live Nation is operating in, it's not just about ticketing. In every market, we're seeing what that looks like in practice, in venue ownership, in the artist management piece, and the sponsorship piece of it. We got into this fight, in 2020, there was a news item about a leaked memo where Live Nation unilaterally announced changes to the artist contracts where they were going to dictate a 20% reduction in the compensation guaranteed to artists at certain festivals. And while they walked that back, it was just sort of a brazen example of what they can get away with because they're so big and powerful. And it happens across the board, right? Like ticket fees are high across the board, but Live Nation is driving that dynamic. Live Nation's huge footprint means the company is earning on ticketing fees for this huge swath of overall ticketing transactions. And so every time an independent promoter does a show at a Ticketmaster contracted venue, they're helping enrich their most powerful competitor, and they might not have even a choice. We see shifts in the deal structures that lock people into these relationships of dependence and foreclose alternatives. And so we lose some of the flourishing of diverse, independent, locally owned venues and options. We lose the ability to hear the full diversity of American music in a sustainable way. And we lose some of the options for how to run the business, fan club companies that have disappeared. In a healthy market, workers can respond to bad contract terms by choosing a different employer, but Live Nation just controls so much that refusing to accept the terms that are offered is just not a choice that many artists have. And we can go deeper into some of these details, but that's a good start.
Great. Thank you so much. John, do you want to go next?
Hi, thanks. And thanks to AELP for convening today's event. So I've been working on live event ticketing issues since 2009, when I organized a coalition of consumer groups, independent promoters and venue owners, and others to oppose the Live Nation Ticketmaster merger. Since that merger was consecrated in 2010, some of our worst fears about what would happen in the music industry have proven true. The company has continually expanded its monopoly, taking over more promoters, opening and buying more venues, and making the experience worse for consumers. I think it's important to do a little bit of level setting, though. Last year, the average concert ticket price was $122.84. There was $9.5 billion in ticket sales across the industry, and that's estimated to go up to $10.5 billion by 2027. So, if the industry apparently looks healthy, why is it that consumers' blood pressure rises every time I tell them that I work on ticketing issues? And I think there are a number of reasons for that. First, it's hard to get tickets at either end of the spectrum. And getting them is always an exercise in frustration. So for in-demand events like the Taylor Swifts and Beyoncés, they sell out in record time, and consumers end up paying through the nose on the secondary market. And then for events that don't sell out because of restrictions that Ticketmaster puts on those tickets, it's hard for fans to save money and get into those shows at below the face value of the price of the ticket. And because of Live Nation's control of so many pieces of the marketplace, it's almost impossible to imagine that competition is going to solve these problems. So what's the solution to this? I think what Senator Klobuchar said is right. We need to look at, number one, how do we stop the monopolist from being a monopolist? Breaking them up potentially into different pieces of their monopoly is a great way to think about going at that. And then how do we get at regulating the dishonest practices that their monopoly has allowed to happen? So, until we do that, I think there's very little hope that competition alone is going to solve this problem.
Great. Thank you so much. And Brian, do you want to kind of add on to that, and then we'll give it over to David after?
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, ALP, for inviting me to speak today. Sports fans sit at a unique position among fandoms when it comes to antitrust harms, because almost every sports league also has an antitrust exemption and utilizes that market power to harm the fan experience. You add that with the market power and Ticketmaster and Live Nation, and you have a recipe for disaster. And that's why we've been opposing the merger. We were very upset when the consent decree was extended, and we've been working with AELP and everyone on the Break Up Ticketmaster campaign. The harms you see from the fan experience, restrictions on ticket transfer, deceptive ticket allocations in their inventory, junk fees, everything else, and even bots to an extent, stems from the root cause that is this monopoly. If you had competition, if you had multiple ticketing companies work at venues and sports teams, you would see lower prices on fees. You would see more favorable consumer terms and conditions on those kinds of tickets. I think the best example of that is if you look in Los Angeles at Crypto Arena, The Lakers are ticketed by Ticketmaster. The Clippers are ticketed by AXS. And the fees for both companies are lower than their national average because they have to compete among each other within the same venue. So venues can have multiple contracts for ticketing allocation distribution, and it actually does lower costs for consumers and makes the overall experience better.
Great. Thank you so much. And David, do you want to kind of close out that first question, giving some of the music and promoter perspective?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. The types of concerts that I promote are much smaller than Taylor Swift concerts. I work at venues that are as small as 100 capacity, 150 capacity. But I don't like a lot of the conversation that is talking about that top line doesn't even start to touch how thoroughly Live Nation has moved into like smaller and smaller spaces. So like the venues that I work at in DC are some of the only venues that don't do co-promotions with Live Nation. And that's because most venues can't afford to not co-promote with Live Nation. Whether or not they're Live Nation venues, bringing Live Nation in to promote shows there because they need the talent that Live Nation has access to fill their calendars. And the venues that I work at, many of them, like one of them, Comet Ping Pong, is a successful restaurant. So we have an outside revenue source, and so that gives us more flexibility. But for a dedicated music venue, you just don't really have as much of a choice to not work with Live Nation. And because of like the way that their market share and like revenue they have from Ticketmaster allows them to make more attractive offers to artists and management. It reshapes how the entire live music industry works because we're all having to compete and like change practices to compete against practices that Live Nation has brought down from the level of arenas and stadiums into small clubs where they've been increasingly moving into over the past several years.
Great. Okay. Next question is specifically for Kevin and David. Can you two talk a bit about artists and artist managers as well as promoters and what they face in terms of what people often describe as an uphill battle with Live Nation? David, you got a little bit into some of what you've seen change over time, but I'd love for you to expand on the artist side of things.
Yeah, I mean, so again, like competing like from an independent venue perspective, it's important to have independent venues so that more artists can be represented like on a local level. There's more of a diversity of art. There's more underrepresented voices that you can put into a venue that is not motivated by these sort of kind of top line metrics and corporate incentives. So like on the artist side, like some of the ways that independent venues have had to like adopt some of the Live Nation practices. Like one example is taking cuts of artist merchandise, which has received a lot of publicity, but that's bad for artists. But it exists within this structure of the standard of taking cuts from artist merchandise like has come out of independent venues needing to compete with Live Nation, who bring in revenue from ticketing, from having this gigantic market share, and find other ways like to compete with the offers that Live Nation gives to artists and management to like draw the same kind of talent into your venue.
Right. I mean, it's very difficult for any company to compete with a venue that can essentially operate at a loss because they're making so much on the ticketing side that it can cover the rest of the operation. And so, when it comes under scrutiny, as we saw after the Senate hearing, as Senator Klobuchar mentioned, for a practice like the merch cuts, they can unilaterally walk away from that revenue stream. But at this point, they're the reason that revenue stream became an industry standard. And so their competitors, are going to, if they walk away from the revenue stream in the same way, it really, at this point, there's a level of dependency on that revenue stream, right? And so harms aggregate with, like, the harms snowball as a result. And it's very difficult for artists, like if you think about artists trying to set up tours, avoiding Ticketmaster becomes deeply challenging. Even at the level of artists who have a lot of leverage, they end up the handful of artists who really have tried to do this have had to end up skipping certain markets because by the time you've gotten past the amphitheater stage, there really may not be rooms available. It's important to think about when you're thinking about market share and how much the marketplace they control, that you're not just thinking about national market share, but you're also thinking about local markets and the challenges associated with an individual company having so many of these local markets locked down at different tiers, right? You can't really get around them. And at times, a company. I should let you go.
I'm sorry. I wish we could go on for a long time, but I have to give it over to Brian and John. At least give them the chance to have one question. So thank you both for that context. It's really, really helpful. And as I said, I wish we could kind of expand on that conversation. But John and Brian, can you two speak to how the ticketing market has been impacted by the bottleneck of Ticketmaster? I know, we heard from Senator Klobuchar some of what that looks like, but how has Live Nation's control over that part of the industry impacted live events?
So if you look at what the Ticketmaster's resale business right now in 2022 was $4.5 billion. They are the largest reseller on the marketplace too. And they are using their primary dominance to create that secondary marketplace. And the secondary marketplace for them is nearly pure profit. There's no new value add that they're adding to it. There's no new product that they're creating. But where it becomes harmful for consumers and anti-competitive is they are intermingling those resale tickets in with the primary tickets. So consumers don't realize when they're going in, it's very fine print that it says this is a resale ticket, this is a standard ticket is what they call it. But they intermingle all of that. So you only have to go to Ticketmaster, and then that limits competition from elsewhere in the industry. And like it or not, the secondary marketplace is the only place in the entire ecosystem in which there is any competition.
Yeah. John, do you want to offer the last word?
Yeah, and I think, if without competition in this space, I think what consumers can expect to experience is a continually bad experience. More of the crashed on sales that we saw with Taylor Swift, because Ticketmaster didn't invest enough resources in protecting their system. More tedious checkouts where you have this clock ticking at the top and you have to continually click through screens just to buy a ticket to a concert, which shouldn't be that hard. And I think just as importantly, more data. We haven't really talked about that, but almost all ticket transactions now, whether you're getting it on the primary or through the secondary, you now have to have a Ticketmaster account. And they are using all of the data they get through the app and through Ticketmaster.com in ways that none of us know about. We don't know who that's being shared with. And so none of this would happen if Ticketmaster actually had to compete with another ticketing platform that provided a better experience than they do, but nobody can compete. And so Ticketmaster's monopoly just continues to underserve us.
Yeah. Well, we have more questions that I wish I could ask about how all of you have kind of participated in the Breakup Ticketmaster Coalition. And I think just hearing this diversity of opinions and what viewpoints we have, it speaks to how many people are harmed by Live Nation's dominance. So with that, getting into the actual harms, I'm going to hand it over to David Dayan, and I have the pleasure of introducing him as the panelist. David is the executive editor at the American Prospect and the author of Monopolized: Life in the Age of Corporate Power. He's also the author of Chain of Title: How Three Ordinary Americans Uncovered Wall Street's Great Foreclosure Fraud. And while I wish I had more time to give David the introduction that he deserves, I will just say that everyone who reads his work comes away as a far more informed individual. And I can't recommend his writing and the work of the American prospect at large enough. So with that, David, I will hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Krista, for that very too kind introduction. Glad to be here. Got three great panelists and almost no time to talk to them. So we're going to jump right into this. All three of you are generally in agreement with the need for action to deal with Live Nation, but you have varying approaches to it. And what we're going to be talking about are those approaches. You've laid them out in papers that you've written on this subject, and hopefully we'll drop those into the chat on YouTube so people can take a more detailed look. There are two parts of this I want to cover. First, I want to talk about the causes of action. What is the basis, the legal basis for a case against Live Nation? I want to start with Michael Carrier of Rutgers University. You focused in your paper specifically on two aspects that could be proper causes of action: tying and exclusive dealing. Can you outline your thinking on this?
Yes, I can. So thank you, and thank you for having this event. So there's a lot that you can say about what Ticketmaster Live Nation has done, but let me just focus on two. So the first is exclusive dealing. Exclusive dealing is where a company is forced to buy all of its requirements from one seller. So in this case, the venues are getting all of their ticketing services from Ticketmaster. In the case law, foreclosure is the most important factor. How much of the market is foreclosed? And another factor is duration. So you look at this market, there's tons of foreclosure. The estimates that I've seen talk about 70 to 80% of major US venues being foreclosed. So for example, if you are a rival to Ticketmaster, those 70 to 80% of venues are completely off limits. That's far more than you need for a claim in terms of foreclosure. In terms of duration, 5 to 10-year contract terms are extremely long, and the courts say that that is enough. They're exacerbated by other issues like tying that I'll talk about in a second, like a more than 100% renewal rate. More venues sign up than leave each year, and a complete lack of pro-competitive justifications. Usually with exclusive dealing, we hear something about free riding. That's not the case here. So in a nutshell, that's the exclusive dealing claim. The tying claim has several requirements. Those are all easily satisfied as well. First, you need two different products. You have that here. You have promotion and ticketing. A venue that wants promotion, that wants the Live Nation artist, has no choice. They have to take the ticketing. So that's the first. The second is coercion. In a lot of these cases, the question is there actually coercion? Here, there's no question. You have this evidence on a silver platter because you have a consent decree that the company didn't even comply with. It's rare for these consent decrees to be extended, and that's what happened here. There are so many instances of threats and retaliation that coercion is easily met. Third, you need market power in the tying product market. So that's the market for artist promotion. You have at least 60% of the promotion market. That's a lot of power. You look at the SEC filings of the company itself. It says, quote, we're the largest producer of live music events. That's not an issue. And then finally, you need some sort of anti-competitive effect in the tied market. That's the ticketing market, the market where someone doesn't want to have Ticketmaster. You have tons of anti-competitive effects there. You have 80% market share that Ticketmaster has. You have high fees, you have reduced quality, and again, a lack of pro-competitive justifications. So just on exclusive dealing and tying alone, these are very straightforward antitrust causes of action that under the existing case law, a court would find to violate antitrust law.
Great. Thank you, Michael, for that very comprehensive, pithy take. Kathleen Bradish, you worked for the antitrust division of the Justice Department. Do you think these are viable causes of action, and what would you add to them? Because I know in your paper for the American Antitrust Institute, you talked about the secondary market a fair bit. What maybe talk about what the causes of action might be there.
Sure. So I would absolutely endorse the theories that Michael has put forward. I agree with him entirely that this is a rare occasion in which the evidence is out there. It's on a silver platter, as Michael put it, because the Live Nation has blatantly disregarded its obligations under the consent decree, and apparently continues to do so, even after the extension of the consent decree. So I think both of those are very viable causes of action. We have an entrenched monopolist, as Michael noted. Live Nation Ticketmaster has been a monopolist in ticketing for 20 years. And it continues to get even more entrenched. If you look at the most recent 10K, you see that Live Nation is growing its market share in the areas where we're going to see more ticketing. So it has one market share in brick and mortar sales. It has a greater market share in internet sales, and it has an even greater market share in mobile sales, which, as we all know, is where the future is going. So we can expect to see Ticketmaster, Live Nation's dominance grow, not shrink over time. So all of these point to a great case for Section 2 monopolization claim. Very briefly on the secondary market, what we're seeing is Live Nation starting to create an ecosystem, just like we've seen with a lot of the big tech companies, using its power in one area to create, to foreclose competition in another area. So we see Ticketmaster, Live Nation trying to keep taking measures to keep customers on their system, including by having their own secondary sales, often in a somewhat deceptive way, and foreclosing the ability of other secondary sales, secondary ticketing sales companies to get a foot in the door, and the effects that those have in increasing competition, not just on the secondary market, but on the primary market as well.
Great. Now, Katie Van Dyke with the American Economic Liberties Project. I want to get your take on this in terms of causes of action. Do you think there's anything else DOJ should be thinking about with this? And maybe you could briefly describe like how defining these causes really informs the remedy that you would then seek.
I think that's a great way of asking about it. Thank you, David. What we wanted to do when we put together this paper was to think about and illustrate what it actually means to break up Ticketmaster, and what are the, as you put it, legal causes of action to do that, and what is the actual end result. The legal causes of action are pretty straightforward. Michael and Kathleen both have done a great job of laying out what the evidence is here. The Department of Justice already, when the merger was first announced, filed a challenge to the merger under the Clayton Act. That's Section 7, also called Section 7. And the consent decree was supposed to resolve that. It was designed to, as the court put it in that order, entering the consent decree and ostensibly resolving this merger challenge. The goal was to remedy the loss of competition that the merger would create. And what we have seen in the last, what has it been, almost 20 years now, is that consent decree has failed. And when a consent decree fails, as this one is, the Department of Justice does have the ability to go back to the original court that entered that consent decree and tell them this consent decree has failed of its essential purpose and it needs to change. So that's one avenue that they can take. I would call that the less aggressive avenue. They also have an option to file an entirely new lawsuit, alleging, as Michael laid out, claims under the Sherman Act based on these exclusive agreements and tying arrangements, which could be, which they would use this past behavior to prove that that Live Nation's business model is anti-competitive. And so I think that they have several options here, and they have an opportunity to be really aggressive to protect American consumers, fans, small businesses like small venues, and artists.
All right, great. Now that we kind of have confirmed DOJ has the ability to do this, let's talk about what they can and perhaps should do. I want to start with Kathleen. You, in your paper, had two remedies in mind. One was divesting Ticketmaster from Live Nation. The second was breaking Ticketmaster up into smaller, what you call baby bell, like smaller entities. Why do you think this properly targets the harm done by Live Nation? And just walk us through, how you think it will work.
Sure. So I think up front, what we need to understand is the difference between a breakup remedy and what is commonly called a behavioral remedy. And one of the problems that the consent decree and the lack of compliance with the consent decree shows is that behavioral remedies don't work as well as breaking up or structural remedies. So behavioral remedies are basically promises by the company that they're not going to engage in anti-competitive conduct. So this was an important part. In the original consent decree, there was a structural part of it. The Ticketmaster had to divest part of it, Live Nation's ticketing business, but it also, the bulk of the consent decree were promises that Ticketmaster wouldn't engage in certain kinds of conduct. And that's what absolutely did not work. And it opens the door for all kinds of failures to comply because the incentives are still there. The incentives for Ticketmaster, Live Nation to continue to try to use their monopoly to keep other competitors out of the business is there, and a promise to DOJ that it won't do that is not enough, especially in an industry like this and a repeat offender the way that Live Nation has been. So all of that is to say that given this track record, the necessity of actually breaking up the company, undoing the merger that created the problem to begin with, on one hand, and on the other hand, breaking up other parts of the company where monopolies in one area are allowing the company to foreclose competition in another. These are just table stakes. We really have to, when contractual behavioral remedies don't work, we need structural remedies, and we can't have anything less than a breakup of the company.
Great, thank you. Now, Katie, your paper goes a little bit further than this. Could you talk about you don't? I'm not sure you think just breaking off Ticketmaster from Live Nation, dealing with the ticketing side with the Baby Bell idea is totally sufficient. Could you outline your thinking on this?
Be happy to. So again, looking at what it means to break up Ticketmaster, we really dug into Live Nation and what Live Nation is. And it has four fairly distinct lines of businesses that it uses to control the live event industry. It has its ticketing business, Ticketmaster, that everybody knows and doesn't love. It has its concert promotion business, which is really what it started as, which is, as I understand it, organizing tours, finding venues, identifying artists, and then on top of that, its third line is its venue management and ownership line. And so they own a large number of major venues in the United States, and they also manage a lot of venues in the United States. And then the fourth prong of that of Live Nation is its artist management business, which means it is actually the manager for a lot of these artists that are going on tour. And so what we have proposed in order to truly have competition and to prevent Live Nation from creating these choke points or using leverage over one business to increase its market power, and another is to break all four of those up into distinct and independent businesses. On top of that, we've proposed that Ticketmaster's host platform that is used to sell tickets should be made available, that other ticketing businesses should be allowed, and that Ticketmaster should be forced to license that host platform so that businesses and competitors, potential rivals who are just getting off the ground actually have a chance of succeeding given the extreme market power that Ticketmaster already has.
Great. So Michael, then how do you see the contours of a remedy playing out? Do we need to, sort of as Katie says, address the full frame of the Live Nation monopoly, or can we be more surgical in our approach? What are your thoughts?
I think we need to address the whole frame. I think a lot of the harm here comes from the fact that this company has its tentacles in so many different elements of the ecosystem. And so you start off with them, again, breaching the consent decree. You have DOJ saying they, quote, have a well-earned reputation for threatening behavior and retaliation. So we can't trust them. As it turns out, the structural remedy is better anyway because the company is so integrated and harms rivals at every step of the process. So, for example, when you divest Ticketmaster, you're allowing ticketing rivals to compete in that market. They don't have to deal with the tying of Live Nation having all this power in the promotion market. When you break it up, you break the loss leader model, as we heard about in the first panel, of losing money in promotion and making it all back in ticketing. Again, the company has its tentacles in each aspect of the process, and they use it in combination, not for any pro-competitive efficiencies, but rather to harm rivals at every step of the process. You look at the general concern with breakups, and they say, well, it's tough to unscramble the eggs because who knows how this company can be broken up. Here, as Katie just said, this is clear. The company holds itself out as having separate divisions. So I think that's really straightforward. And so at the end of the day, I think there needs to be some structural changes. I think we need to break up the company. We also need to deal with these exclusive contracts that are extremely concerning and blocking off rivals. And maybe I'll close just with an analogy to a cartoon. So in the Peanuts cartoon, Lucy is holding the football and Charlie Brown comes running up every time to kick it. And every time she pulls it away and he suffers. Why should we? And why should consumers and artists and venues and promoters, why should we all play the role of Charlie Brown in this situation? We've gone down the consent decree road. It's failed. It's time to do something different.
Great. So just to wrap up here, thinking about this, you've all outlined, very aggressive structural remedies here. Are there anything that needs to be done to go beyond that? Are there regulatory measures, legislative measures that can, ensure that if we restructure this market, that it will stay in a position that will not continue to harm the public, venues, artists, et cetera? I'll give that, throw that out to anybody who wants to take it, just for like a minute.
I'm happy to jump in there. One condition, I think, of breaking up Live Nation and Ticketmaster is prohibiting each of those independent business lines from going into any of the other for a significant period of time.
So like a structural separation, in other words.
Exactly. So Live Nation, it's not enough for Live Nation to just be divested of Ticketmaster. They need to be foreclosed from entering the ticket market independently, which would completely defeat the purpose of the breakup in the first instance. So yes, I think that would be an important part of it.
Great. Anything from Kathleen or Michael on this point?
I completely agree with Katie. It doesn't do any good to break up the company and have them put back together the next day. This has to be a part of it.
Kathleen, any other thoughts?
Well, for me, this highlights the need, as Senator Klobuchar noted up front, for stronger for legislation that supports the antitrust laws. One of the things that could be very helpful here and would have maybe prevented this problem in the very beginning is if there were a legislative structural presumption on vertical mergers. In other words, it becomes presumptively illegal for Ticketmaster to, with a 80% share of the market, to acquire Live Nation. Had that existed at the time, perhaps we could have prevented this whole chain of events and where we are today.
Well, great. Well, I look forward to seeing the Department of Justice take all of your advice and work them into whatever it decides to put out in the coming days and weeks. And I thank you all for being here. Once again, we have Michael Carrier from Rutgers University, Kathleen Bradish from the American Antitrust Institute, and Katie Van Dyke from the American Economic Liberties Project. I'm David Dayan, Executive Editor of the American Prospect, and now I'm going to turn it back over to Morgan Harper for closing remarks. Thanks, Morgan.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you, David. Thank you to all of our panelists on both of the panels for giving that overview of how the market actually works. As we heard from David Combs, when you're an artist, promoter, actually trying to make a living, and all of the experience we're having as fans. And then, of course, the second panel working through just how the Department of Justice might go about structurally separating Live Nation Ticketmaster, which I think that was the clear message. It was the name of our coalition all along, Break Up Ticketmaster. The time is now, and we continue to encourage the Department of Justice to take that step. And all of you, as Senator Klobuchar said, are a part of that. And so we're going to end today's event with just a culmination hype video of all of the work that's happened over the past year and a half and all that you all have helped to build. And we will look forward together to seeing just exactly what the DOJ does. So stay tuned, and thanks to everyone for joining and everyone who's been part of the campaign.
Music fans are getting fed up with Ticketmaster.
Anger among Taylor Swift fans.
A group filing a lawsuit in court today. Bruce Springsteen furious with Ticketmaster.
A lot of people, including me, are frustrated and concerned.
There's literally not been a single time in our career when we played at a Live Nation venue where we had any opportunity to not have Live Nation be the promoter or not have Ticketmaster be the ticketing company.
Ticketmaster. They are the biggest player in the ticket market and the largest producer of live music concerts in the world.
They control pretty much everything.
Which venues artists play to who can actually buy tickets and when.
You have the world's largest concert promoter that owns the world's largest ticketing company that also has a management group, and this same company owns and operates venues.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Obscene and insane. Vertical integration on steroids.
Well, there is a new effort to unwind that merger between Ticketmaster and Live Nation.
This is going to be the first hearing that the Senate will be holding, and it shows that this is a priority issue for folks who are on the Judiciary Committee and that they see that there are problems with the Live Nation Ticketmaster merger.
Ticketmaster sucks.
Whether it's for fans, performers, promoters, or venue operators, we need to make sure we have competition to bring prices down and bring innovation in and stop the fiascos.
I want Ticketmaster down.
We want to see some change happen.
If there is going to ever be an opportunity to break up this company, now's the time.